What is happening, everybody? If everybody's having a fantastic Friday. Oh, wait, it's Sunday. Damn wishful thinking. Anyway, hope everybody had a great weekend. So yeah, kind of like the thumbnail implies, going to be working on my first Fox. So basically, this is more or less just kind of an update video. If you guys had some questions about the car, I wanted to make sure that I was able to get those kind of out of the way, basically. But over the next few months, I'm going to be working on my original, the very first Fox Mustang that I ever owned. So pretty special thing. And so the car needs some work. In fact, it needs quite a bit of work, but it's running, it's driving. It's doing everything that it should, but it does need a few things. So typically when you start to work on something like this, I mean, obviously this thing is nothing but, nothing but good vibes with this particular one for me anyway. Like I say, lots of awesome memories, lots of, basically learned pretty much everything that I know because of that particular car. So, obviously I want to give it quite a bit of love. And again, a real high sentimental value for this thing. So where do you start, right? Well, I guess, start from the beginning on this thing. The way it sits now, it's a pretty basic combination. There's not a lot to it. This is not, and there's never going to be a lot to this car. I mean, it's going to be true to form, true to fashion, the way that it sits now. But there are some structural things I'm going to have to fix. But getting into it, what has it got? Basically, it's your garden variety, Lightning 351, AFR 185 heads, Lightning lower intake, GT40 upper, world-class T5 with four-wheel disc brake, or rather rear disc brake conversion. It's a Cobra rear disc brake conversion, not the North race cars rear brakes. And it's got F-cam with 1.7s. So pretty much basic run-of-the-mill type of a hot rod. We're looking at, by today's standards. But back in the day, this thing was actually pretty nasty. So before it was the configuration that it is now, it was a 302 with a B-cam 1.7s, and then later F-cam and 1.7s with a Powerdyne supercharger. So, and then the STKR, basically it's a J9 intercept, so you can tune the thing. And that's the tweaker is what's on there also. That's what allows you to make all the changes. But it's got, Pro-M mass airflow meter, 70 millimeter, I think it's a 70 millimeter throttle body. SFI steel scatter shield. I mean, it's got some pretty cool parts on it. But all in all, really neat car. It's got a catted H-pipe, but that's not all. I mean, the car is running full compliant EPA. I mean, it's like California emissions. So air pump on there. Heated throttle body thing is still on there. It's kind of funny. The car is basically just like the way you would have hoped that a Fox body Mustang would have come from the factory. That's kind of the idea behind that. It's the way my dad, really envisioned that car going together. So the cool thing, though, is that it is running, but it does need some work. So basically, it kind of works like this. First things first, got to fix the radiator. It's a Fluidyne aluminum radiator, and it's got a little bit of a leak to it. So that's got to get fixed. That'll be coming out of the car at some point this week. The pain in the ass fix on this thing is going to come with a freaking seat. Man, the way that these seats are bolted in the... Get it, Skeeter? Sent that sucker right back to hell from whence it came. So the seats, the front portion of the seat bolts to what is more or less it's like a subframe on top of the floorboard, for lack of a better way of putting it. I can get the whole thing from, I think it's late model restoration or something like that, but it would involve me basically cutting out every spot weld, removing that piece, putting the new one in, and welding in more or less this whole new piece. I'm going to try to do a patch fix with it. I'm going to get basically some 18 gauge steel, kind of fabricate my own platform, and I'll weld in, I'll cut the affected portion of it out, of that subframe thing out, get the stud out of there, mount the stud onto the plate, or at least mount the plate, temporarily tack it, mount the seat, mark it. Anyway, I'm going to try to document all of that too, just so you guys can see what's going on with that. A little bit of cut, a little bit of welding needs to take place, but it's not that big of a deal. And really none of it is that big of a deal. It's just time consuming. And that's the thing. You got to budget quite a bit of time when you're just trying to work on that thing, for 30 minutes to, a couple of hours at a time. So, but that's going to be what's coming on with it. But until then, obviously I got to get that radiator fixed. Also, I need to get a new electric fan for the car, because it does have an electric fan, but I'd like to get a little bit better fan for it. Really some paint correction. That's the other thing. Paint really needs a lot of work on that car. As you might imagine, I mean, the thing's 30 years old. It's going to need a little bit of work. So at any rate, that's what's going to be going on with that car. As far as, big power or anything like that, absolutely out of the question. I mean, the car hardly has any miles on it, realistically speaking. And again, it's a 351 car, so it's nice and torquey. It runs good, especially with its 373 gears. But in terms of throwing a ton of power at it, it's going to remove all kind of the interesting out of that car. Everybody's got an LS swap Fox body. Everybody's got a supercharged. Everybody's got something that is just, overpowered and actually not all that fun. And when I took the car out just to kind of give it a quick shakedown run, the car is a riot to drive. So, throwing more power at it may not necessarily be the thing for that car. Actually, probably needs a little bit more transmission just for the power that it's got now. So anyway, let me check in with everybody, see who all's in. CFL's checking in a thumbs up. I like it. Alex checking in saying, Fox as in Fox body? Yes. Saying not the prettiest cars, but full of potential. I don't know, man. I like those cars. Sean saying, hey, B, I love me some Fox stock. Let's dig in. I like it. Destroy 13 is checking in. Say, Professor. Sean saying he used to own an 89 Mustang GT Midnight Blue, but kind of turned it into a 93 Cobra clone. A lot of folks did that back in the day. 93 Cobra upper, 93 spoiler, 93 front grille. Nice. I'm saying about 240 to the rear wheels, traded off on a 93 Cobra. I understand that. He's asking, what wheels am I running on the 89 GT? 95 R wheels were the ones that I had. They're basically like the Cobra R wheels. They're the same wheels as the Cobra R, and they're painted to look like the Cobra R's with that chrome center cap, which is what the Cobra R's look like. Boosted Emmy's checking in saying, what up, Mason? Got the arm flex. I like it. Destroy 1320 saying, I'm helping my Marine buddy with an 89 notchback, 9-second nitrous car, 351 power plant. Crazy how easy it is to work on, lightweight and powerful, for sure. And then Sean saying, I've owned 8 different 91 to 83 Fox cars, a 95 Cobra R clone, and an 03, 04 Mustang. So just to give you guys an idea, I've owned quite a few Mustangs over the years. My very first one was the 95 GTS. From there, it was my Fox, which is up. In fact, I only had the GTS for a short amount of time, and then I got my Fox, and it stayed in the family the entire time. But the main thing is that I used to use Mustangs as work cars. And I would get a new one about every 2 years, give or take. And the reason why I ran Mustangs is because, number one, they were relatively affordable. Number two, they were bulletproof in terms of durability. I mean, you could beat the hell out of those cars. And they seemingly, son of a bitch, skeeters are everywhere. They seemingly really wouldn't miss a beat. And that was something that I really liked about them. It's just with minor, hang on, I gotta kill this thing. Son of a bitch. Dead. God, freaking skeeters, hate those damn things. Anyway, they were basically bomb-proof, and so I could, practically run them into the ground and, trade them in and get a new one. So I've owned, I don't even know how many Mustangs I've owned. I've owned if I'm trying to think off the top of my head how many I've actually owned, it's probably somewhere like 6, 7, maybe. It's sad when you start to forget how many of those cars that you've owned. But none of them have ever really been as, I never really was that attached to any of them. There was only really 2. I had a 94 Cobra. That's the one that had the 427, Kuntz & Company 427, T-Trim supercharger, nasty fast car. That's the one I did a lot of street racing with. Used to actually make money with that car, but then it would break, so I would have to spend my... I was spending so much money just to campaign that car that at one point I just gave up on it, and that's when I got into Vipers. But before that, though, it was always the Fox, and so that's something that I've always enjoyed and have always loved. Boosted Emmy's saying that his son has a 97 Cobra. Really cool car, as a matter of fact. One of my favorites. That all original, looks new. And Sean's asking, did you notice a drop in durability of the 5-liter after they went to the hyper-protected pistons in 92, 93? Actually, they had hypers in 87, 88, and 89 also, leading into 92 and 93. No, we never saw any. As a matter of fact, one of the funny things was just the running joke of how durable those 5 liters were. When we were screwing around with those cars back in the day, I mean, we would throw heads, cam, intake, basically throw everything at those cars, beat the living hell out of them, and they never really seemed to die. So, whether it was, hitting it with 100 or 125 shot of nitrous, blowers, whatever, it didn't really seem to matter. They all seemed to do fairly well. Now, you got to keep something in mind, though. You're starting out with roughly 200, and if you've got a healthy one, 225 horsepower. Most of them were really, if you back math them after dynoing, most of them were really around 205 horsepower, and some of the better ones would maybe back math in the 215. There were some issues with throttle bodies not opening all the way back then. That would contribute a little bit to that. So, you'd always have to check it. You'd always have everybody, have their buddy sit in the car, press the throttle all the way open with the elbow off and look and make sure they were all good. So anyway, some kind of dumb stuff with Fox body stuff back in the day, but never did lose my love for them. And as a matter of fact, one of the funny things about the Fox body Mustang is that the Fox body Mustang is a universal solvent, it seems like, for car guys. You got Chevy guys, you got Ford guys, you got Mopar guys, and the list goes on and on, right? Well, when you think about it, everybody has owned, driven, or ridden in a Fox Mustang, and nobody's got really anything bad to say about it. I mean, what is bad to say about it? It's by today's standard, you can't really compare it by today's standard. It's all about basically how that car performed and what it was capable of doing at the time. Hey, Sean, thank you very much. Saying $5 for your 5-liter. Thank you. And Queasy's asking, are the 11 to 14, thank you very much, brother. Queasy's asking, are the 11 to 14 Mustangs pretty reliable? They're very reliable, but go with 12 to 14. The 11s had a little bit of an issue with the squirters, the oil squirters. And they also had a little bit of an issue with ring flutter. And so what would happen is that at high RPM, the rings, the piston rings, would get a little bit of a flutter, and you'd get some oil past the rings. Well, y'all can see me doing some kung fu tonight. Oh, these skeeters. Anyway, that could potentially cause some detonation, oil getting past the ring, and would pop. Typically, it was number 8 or number 2, I think, is what we'll let go. So, but in 2012-ish, like mid 2012, they kind of fixed that. So check that out. Sean's bringing up something else too, which is true. Sometimes the stock timing on a Ford factory 5-liter was actually retarded, and yes, we would also adjust the throttle position sensor. I've seen the timing as low as 5 degrees on a stock 5-liter. So what was happening back then is, yeah, you would have the with the bung out, and if you know 5 liters, you know what I'm talking about with the bung out. So basically, it locks the timing out. You would check it, and instead of being a 10 is the factory spec, and this is well, let me finish my thought here, and you would see it at like 7, or here was the other thing, and of course that it all depended when they were setting it up. Whoever was doing the initial timing on it, everything would drop into place. They would fire it up, I guess, test or whatever, and depend on where they're looking at, where the pointer was. So if you're not looking at the pointer from a 90-degree angle and you're looking at it a little bit off, you could lock that thing down and actually be set retarded. The other thing was that the pointers weren't always accurate. And so you could play with timing. And so some cars would like the 5-minute, tune-up on a Mustang that would typically net you about 15 or 20 horsepower, which is a lot in terms of a percentage gain. Part of that was bumping up the timing. Some of them liked 14 degrees of timing. Some of them like 16, and it all depends on how you're looking at that timing mark. Anyway, there's a lot. When it comes to tolerance stacking, the Mustangs are pretty high on that. So, but again, it just kind of added to the flavor of the car. I mean, no, when I say that Mopars are all snowflakes, like none of them are alike, you've never been around Fox body Mustangs. Ain't no 2 of those things alike, and that's just kind of the fun part about those cars. But anyway, that is very true. And then let's see, Riff's checking in today. What up, B? Got the arm flex. Sean saying, add me to the list of many old school Mopar fans and Mustang fans better now driving modern midsize muscle Mopar. So here's I'll say this, and I've said this a lot, and what I wanted to talk about the Fox today as well. Aside from the fact that be on the lookout because there's going to be stuff on that car, and it's got a really cool backstory behind it too. The car is definitely worth keeping and saving, and bringing back, But so most of us that grew up in either the 80s, the 90s, early to mid 2000s, and however you want to put that together, whatever growing up means, and as far as that goes, but you're coming up, you're kind of cutting your teeth and getting out there into the world during that period of time. There was no Mopar to speak of. Yeah, there was the Viper, but let's be real. I mean, nobody could afford the Viper at that time. And like I say, I mean, I went through 3 of them. They weren't anything. I mean, they were more of a novelty than anything else. Fast for sure, but more of a novelty than anything else because nobody. I mean, you just didn't really see them that often unless you were looking for them. Roll racing, big nitrous, big mile an hour type stuff that we were doing with those cars. But on the street, where sane people would go street racing, not idiots like me, you didn't see any Mopars, really. I mean, you'd see the occasional Duster, something with a fairly hot 318 or 340 or a 360, but super rare were the big blocks. But that's really what you didn't see any Mopars, and the ones that were out there fell into one of 2 categories. Either they were junk, I mean, like real talk, like looks like they spent their life on a beach type of junk, or they were just really nice cars. And I mean, this is back in the day when you would see a 440 Cuda or a 440 Challenger or a big block Roadrunner, for example. Those things weren't necessarily rare, although you just didn't see them every weekend. I mean, you'd see them, maybe once a month or something like that. Ooh, that's a big one. How the hell? Freaking Iron Man mosquitoes around here. But anyway, getting back to it though, nobody could afford them, and nobody really wanted to mess with them because number one, they were real expensive to hot rod, especially in light of a Fox body or any Chevrolet for that matter. And by the way, good luck finding a nice one of those. I mean, Camaros, Elcos, Chevelles, things like that. This is about the time in their life cycle where nobody wanted them, and they were just barely falling into that cool category, enough so that people would start to bring them back to life. The whole survivor thing really wasn't a thing back then either for those cars, for the Mopars or anything, mainly because line one of those cars up against a Fox body or an F body that had just been a little bit breathed on, and the race realistically wasn't close. And I get it, everybody's got the uncle that had the fastest car in town. We're not talking about Uncle Nasty. We're talking about, again, you know, cars that sane people were street racing back then, not like the morons like me that were out there just going crazy with stuff. Let's see. Oh, but anyway, getting back to the point though, most of the guys back then though really wanted Mopar. There was a lot of closeted Mopar fans. We all wanted the Challenger or the Cuda. We all wanted something along those lines, and none of us could ever afford any of that. Even back then, those cars were starting to get expensive, and then to try to make them fast, well, then you're just trying to keep up with the modern stuff, and then you get into all the headaches that came with trying to make an old car really fast. You just couldn't really do it back then. So anyway, a lot of those guys, when the Challenger was released in 2008, they always wanted one of those cars. They're coming from a Fox, they're coming from an SM95 or a New Edge car. You know, S197s were still fairly new to the game. They'd only been out for really 3 years. That was their third model year. You know, it was just kind of a natural transition for a lot of those guys to start to move in that direction stylistically. So anyway, which, you know, obviously makes sense. That's kind of how the Mopar family, as it sits today, how it kind of came to be. Most of that is most of those people will trace their roots, their DNA, so to speak, in this case, to Ford and to Fox bodies. Rick is saying, I'm trying to go with a 285 upper and 10% lower and E85, but I was quoted 11 grand to do, which seems like a little too much. Who quoted you 11 grand for that? Because I don't see $11,000 in that, unless we're talking about, okay, so we're talking about that, right? Okay, so did that $11,000? So let's break that down. $1,300 for the fuel system. Call it $350 for the upper pulley. What is it? I don't know, $500 for the lower pulley. So what was that? $2,200. We're at unlock the PCM. Call that. Now you're at 25. Now you're talking about the tune. I'm just going to say 33. Let's call it 35 for lack of a better way of putting it. So 35 for that. You've got 6 hours ish to do the fuel system. That'll put you at just call it 4,100. You got 6 hours to do the balancer. So 41, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 37. So what did I say? 47. We're at 47 right now. Yeah, I'm not seeing 11 grand in there. I can see a little bit. There's going to be other labor charges and things like that, but I don't think 11 grand is really where you're at. So let's say you're at 40. Let's say you're at 4,500. Just, you know, in Mason's garage here. You know, which would include the tune, the unlock, and all of that. You also need a drive shaft. Put you at 51. Half shafts wouldn't charge you labor to do that if you're doing the half shafts. So 51, 61, figures 71. Yeah, 70, I mean, 7 grand ish, right around in there. And again, you know, I don't know what we're talking about now for cat delete, probably. So 71, 75, 76 for labor for that. And then for the trans tune, didn't think about the trans tune initially. So now I'm looking at about 8. So you're probably somewhere around 8 for that. Sean saying, I timed my 5 liter at least 15 degrees, and I always ran in 91 octane. Cars ran like a watch. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. That 14 to 16 degree range is typically what they're going to like. Now, when I go in and I tune those things, I'm messing with the tweaker stuff, and I'm, you know, basically just setting the car up to act as though it's got a little bit more timing through the mid-range, and I'll back it off at peak torque, and I'll throw a little bit more in on the back half and just call it good. So it'll act like it's at like 16 degrees. I'll back it down to 14, and then I'll throw it back up to like it's at 16. Let's see. Some Ferrari guy is saying, looked into getting Paxton on my 2015 GT M6. How much should I expect the shop to charge for install? Also, should I get the oil pump gear upgraded? Yes, you should get them upgraded. I noticed the Roush cars come with stock oil pump gears, which is dumb. Actually, the Roush cars come with stock oil pump gears because they have got more nannies than I even really care to get into. In fact, when a Roush car would come into the shop, we would just dead it, just reflash it to a factory GT. There's no way you're going to get around that stock configuration from Roush. But how much should it charge? Should they charge you? You're probably looking in terms of hours. I would say somewhere around, let me think about this for a minute. Everything included, probably 14 hours. Maybe 15 hours, something like that. And then you've got the oil pump gears that are going to be included with that as well, or going to be additional to that, probably 4 hours, 5 hours. So you're probably looking at, you might be looking at 20 hours total. So it depends on what your local, I got to turn the fan on, it's getting nasty over here. It depends on what your local shop is going to charge you, but typically you're looking at like, I don't know, somewhere around, you know, you're looking somewhere around $100 an hour, typically. Some shops are going to be around 125. Some are as high as 140. So that'll give you an idea. Sean's saying he beat a lot of late 60s, early 70s cars on the street with his 89 GT. The old school guys were surprised how fast Fox cars were. So they're at that point in time also, let me tell you how history lesson. So how potent the 5 liters were back in the day. On the street, if you were running a slick on the street, or ET Streets, which was a bias ply street tire. It's the tire that the ET Street R was basically fashioned after. If you were running a set of ET Streets with a Fox body, there was very little that could mess with you on the street. Even some big block 60s muscle cars would have a real hard time dealing with Fox bodies on the street, especially in the stoplight to stoplight game. It just, you had, yeah, okay, so lower horsepower, but still very lightweight car with a fairly aggressively geared 5-speed, and everybody ran 373s. So with that particular setup and really nothing else done to the car, it was in all conditions a 13-second car. And you got to remember that back in the day, a 13-second car was fast. Like, that was something to be messed with on the street. Now, I get it. If everything is fast, then nothing is fast. I understand what you're going to say here, but hear me out here. It was a lot more fun because everybody was more or less wearing the same type of uniform. You know, everybody was running Fox body Mustangs or F bodies back then. All the cars were fairly quick, and a really fast version of either one was in the high 11s. So it was always some really, really good racing, a lot of really fun street racing. It's not like the street races were lasting, you know, 14, 15, 18 seconds long. It was typically first gear, second gear, third gear to the top of third gear, and then you get out of it, maybe get into fourth gear on some of the longer stretches if you're actually running like a true 8th mile or something like that. But for the most part, it was just a lot of fun. So anyway, the guys would, let me get this motherfucker right here. Oh, son of a bitch. Anyway, a lot of guys, what they would do is they would just shock some of these guys in these older muscle cars. Established old guard muscle cars really couldn't mess with the Fox bodies back then. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I had a buddy of mine who had an 84 Mustang GT. And you go, 84. Well, yeah, but it had the 302 GT40 heads that were milled aftermarket pistons, had a different camshaft in it. Basically the whole 9 yards for the time. And the car was, you know, a kind of a low 13-second car on the street. And there was very little that could mess with that car just in the street light to street light racing. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we all grew up doing. Everybody was racing back then. Down here in Houston, you had Center Street in Pasadena, Texas. You had Rankin. You had Westheimer. You had several areas that were hot for racing, especially anywhere around the airports, Hobby Airport, Bush Airport on the north side of town. You had that's where we would all go racing back then. So back then it was Houston Intercontinental Airport. So let's see. Kevin saying, hey Mason, with the Hemi automatics, if you leave them in sport or drive in manual mode, can you avoid the defects of MDS? So I think sport won't, but manual mode will. And if you've got a truck, you put it in tow haul mode, and that'll also kill it. And also, if you put it with the trucks, if you go down on the gear shift selector and then up and leave it in what would be like manual, but trucks manual means a little bit different thing, then it'll also kill the MDS. Sean saying, considering how good the sales were, the 86 and 93 Fox platform, it's surprising how rare they are to see now. They were kind of disposable there, but they're shooting up in value. Here's the thing when it comes to Fox Mustangs. To say that they were disposable is an understatement. I mean, they were the can of beans that you just, I mean, nobody thinks to save a can of beans, right? You would build them up, beat the hell out of them, tear the freaking torque boxes out of them. Something would bend, break, tear, like the seat mount, like I've got to fix in this car. All of that, but you would people just disposed of them, and all of them turned into race cars at some point. The cars are a little bit squirrely, and so if you try to do anything dumb with any real amount of power, they have a tendency to get a little bit nasty and, do their own thing. So, a lot of, and they were cheap. I mean, there was a time, oh my God, there was a time when you would trip over Mustangs for sale. 5 liters for sale, they were everywhere. And again, they were just cheap playthings that nobody expected to last past their 3rd owner. I mean, they were basically considered to be junk at that point. But yet, there were some that were, leading up to 93 with the Cobras in 93. But when the Cobra came out, it was kind of a special car, and a lot of folks started to keep those. They would hoard those cars a little bit. So, as you may imagine, as time passes, people kind of forget about them, but people start to get a little bit nostalgic for those types of cars. And again, if you've never driven one, and it was funny when I was driving mine today. What was funny about it is that you're reminded of how light the car is. You're reminded of how basic the car is by comparison with one of these newer vehicles. It's just not even, you can't compare the two. It's so different, the driving experience. And it's the last of, so the Fox Mustang, it's kind of interesting because it represents the last of the old school muscle car type of a car. No nannies, V8, manual transmission, rear wheel drive, kind of a bare bones car. Nothing that you don't need. I mean, even the cars that were loaded out were still pretty basic and very basic by today's standards. So in that respect, they're actually really good. Decent, ooh, you gonna die. Decent suspension geometry, enough. I mean, you can make them handle just fine. And just the sheer stupidity that you can just throw at that car in terms of dumb fun stuff you can do, is kind of worth the cost of admission here. So, anyway, the car represents a very special place, and I'm actually, with all the retro styling that we keep getting, I'm gonna get this little bitty one keeps flying around here. With all the retro styling that we keep seeing, I'm actually surprised that the Mustang hasn't started to gravitate towards that Fox-ish kind of a body style. Something that would be a little bit reminiscent for that, because listen, I get the whole, first gen look. You know, even the new Mustangs have that little first gen-y kind of look, but I don't know, man, a little bit. You want to stick with the retro thing, give us a little bit of that Fox love, you know, modernize the Fox body look or something like that. I think that'd be kind of nifty. Let's see. Oh, Rich saying, I already have an unlocked PCM, a 180 thermostat, one-piece drive shaft, and diff brake. So I don't see 11 grand as an outcome. No, in that case is no. Is that as if I want to go with the 285 upper and 10 lower on E85? Yeah, it's just that's a lot of cheddar for something like that, bro. I mean, it's why you're asking. I mean, you're right to question that number. I would ask them. I mean, they need to break that down for you. Where is that number coming from? Why and how do they get to that number? And I think if you look at where you're at with that, I think a lot of that's going to be in some blown up labor. You know, look at an upper pulley swap. They're going to probably charge you 6 hours for something like that. It should only be like 2. You know, look at stuff like that, because that's typically where you'll see it. And you know, they might be expecting you to come back and say, yeah, it's just too much. They go, oh, well, we'll knock 5 hours off of this, or 6 hours or whatever. That's probably what's going to happen. We never played that game, and you know, the price is what it is. If you're a veteran first responder, we'll hook you up a little bit, but aside from that, if you want the best, you got to pay for the best. Biaga is saying, keep it up, B. Got the fist pump. I like it. Ethan's saying, B. Mason talking Mustangs tonight, huh? All he's got to do next is get a Coyote and join the dark side. Not happening, Captain. Listen, I'm not no on that. First of all, it's just too easy. You know, the Mustang, the Coyote thing, neat enough, but no. We're talking about Fox body Mustangs. And to me, Fox body Mustangs kind of have their own place. They stand on their own. It is, I think, the best-selling Mustang ever released, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not, I'll be shocked. But in terms of actual units per year, Sean can let me know on this, taking the 64.5 and maybe the 66 out of the equation. I know the 67 did well, but man, I got to tell you, I think Fox body Mustangs outsold all of them, and for good reason. So love me some Fox body. And Sean said everything was pretty normal on the street until the 03 term. He dropped a bomb on everybody. Well, actually, I'll disagree with you, brother. Everything was A-okay until the lightning showed up on the scene. Give you a little history on how I became infatuated with lightnings. I had gone out one night with a buddy of mine. We were in my 97 GTS. And I was not on the Bogarts. We were basically just out being stupid, hanging the thing sideways, coming out of U-turns and stuff like that. Just out kind of playing around with the car. And I had a guy in a Lightning roll-up next to me. And he's running full drag pack, Stifler's long bars. I don't know what exhaust, but it sounded good. And we're at a stoplight, and he asked if I want. He was like, "Hey, you want to run them?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm on street tires. You want to go from a roll? We can hit it, but I'm on street tires." And he's like, "Nah, we're good." Light turns green. Boom! Peace out. He's gone. This truck left. It was the hardest leaving thing I had ever seen on the street. That was like a stock looking car. Like the only things that I had seen leave harder than this truck were cars that you knew were like an 8th mile drag race style street race car, not a freaking truck for sure. And I think it was 2 weeks later, the same buddy of mine that I was riding around with had a Lightning sitting in his driveway. But yeah, when the lightning hit the scene, that caught a lot of people's attention. But it really wrecked shop when the Termies came out. But the Lightnings freaked everybody else out. But Era's asking, are Roush performance motors a good option for a resto mod on a 90s F-150 pickup? Sure, absolutely. Roush makes some great stuff, man. Look, They make some great stuff. They've been doing it for a long time. So yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with that at all. X-Cash is saying, Termy really changed the game until Ford outdid themselves with the GT500. Let me tell you why I love the GT500 so much. Especially when did they come out? 07, 08, whatever it was. God, I'm just going back so many years now. They released that car when I'm talking about Ford here. Ford released the GT500 when they did not have to. There was absolutely no reason for that car to exist other than to fuel enthusiasts and to fuel enthusiasm for Ford. What I mean by that? So there was no Camaro at all at that point in time. We did from 02 to 2010. What was that, right? No Camaro, no Challenger, certainly no Hellcat. And when Ford released the GT500, to me, you kind of got the whole trifecta at that point. You had the 99 through 04 Lightning. So, badass Lightning. You had a badass there because that was the beginning of what this car is. So you had the Lightning, and you had, to me, a really cool car, the 96 Cobra. And the reason why I liked it so much is a 4-valve V8. It was just awesome to see that kind of, pseudo exotic, right? But then after that, of course you had the Terminator, but then you had the GT500. But the Lightning, the Terminator, and the GT500 were all delivering old school big block torque, old school big block horsepower. The Lightning making 450 plus foot-pounds of torque. The Terminator was, 390 torque. The GT500, the initial run at 500 foot-pounds of torque. Very cool cars. And let me tell you something. If you've never driven a GT500, first of all, if you've never driven a Lightning, you're just missing out on just something that is so cool. And again, something that's so cool that by today's standard is not fast. Like, it ain't fast at all. But what it is real snappy, real torquey, and a lot of fun to drive. And that's where I want to make the distinction here. Lightnings aren't fast, but they're a bunch of fun to drive. Fox body Mustangs basically on a time slip. Okay, they're not fast, right? 14 flat car, 1350 car, whatever. But they're a lot of fun to drive. But fast really started with the Terminator Cobra, and then they just kind of built upon that with the GT500. With the GT500, things got real. That's when you got that big block horsepower, big block torque, big block driving experience, with the only downside being that car is never offered with an automatic the way that the Lightning was. And the Lightning was never offered with a manual, which a lot of people complained about then too. Enter SRT10 truck, right? But getting back to it, that's really more what Ford was doing at the time. They were releasing vehicles for the enthusiast. They were releasing vehicles that had no reason to exist, only for the enthusiast. Whereas today, you see Mopar releasing the Hellcat, right? Then fast forward a little bit and you get the Demon / Red Eye platform, which is arguably inferior to the Hellcat platform, so say some folks. But then you got every other Hellcat variant with the Hellcat this and the Hellcat that and everything else. But it's so papered up that nobody can afford it, right? Starting to sound familiar. But back then, they were expensive, but you could still buy a GT500. You could still buy a Lightning. You could still buy a Terminator Cobra. And they weren't so far out of the realm of reality in terms of fiscal responsibility around the household. Whereas, getting your mitts on something like this or any of the other Hellcat variants that are out there, pick one, you can't make that same argument. And so, they're fast now, but they're not that fun kind of giddy, make you want to do dumb things kind of fast, or fun, I should say. And you just don't feel the speed. You don't feel the snappiness the way that you did back then. So one more thing I want to mention too, when we're talking about the Fox body, it's on the shoulders of the Fox body and the sails and the, well, strength of the enthusiasm behind Ford with the Fox body that moved into the SN95 kind of the era of the Mustang, I'll be honest. But it was because of those funds and the move into SVE, SVT, and all the other stuff that came along with it, with the Cobra. It's because of that the development money was there for the Lightning, that it was there for the Terminator Cobra. And one thing a lot of people forget about the Lightning too is it was out for a long time before the next thing came out, which was the Terminator Cobra. It came out in 99. If you had a kid in basically 99, and the kid would be basically going to kindergarten when that Terminator Cobra was released. So that's how long it took to get to that point. And that's 04, but 5, 6, 7, now you got the GT500. Pretty cool stuff. And by the way, the Lightning and the Terminator Cobra were both around and in dealer showrooms at the same time in 03 and 04. So pretty cool stuff from Ford. Some things that, well, quite honestly, that Mopar could really learn from. And Ford has had a history of putting together cars for the enthusiast, for delivering vehicles that kind of the everyman can get behind the wheel of and enjoy. Again, it's look at the Bronco, for example. Anyway, getting it on here. Shawnee's saying that Coyote's not the dark side. It's a heck of an engine. No, yeah, Ethan's just trolling because Coyote's, you know, the darling of the aftermarket right now, and basically the scourge of anybody that isn't running nines. Shawnee said, I traded my 93 Cobra off on a brand new 03 Mach 1, but I would rather have my 93 Cobra back if I could have any of my older cars in the 03 Cobra too. Yeah. It's tough to get, in fact, it's real tough to get excited about some of the SN95 cars. I like them a lot, and arguably with a set of Flowmasters or Flowmaster-esque mufflers, it's tough to say whether the 4.6 or the 5.0 is the better sounding car. I'll leave that subjectivity up to you guys, but catless H-pipe with either one, gotta tell you, man, tough call. Kevin saying, hey, E-Force charges $1,000 extra to get their tuner with their supercharger. So my question is it worth getting their stock tune to keep the warranty they have, or just go another route for a tune? Very, very good question. It's a question that everybody has got to ask when they go looking into those E-Force superchargers. So I will say this, if you get one of those vehicles, or if you get a supercharger and you've got one of these Hemi cars, I would say that the stock tune is good for the E-Force. It is in fact better than it used to be. It's not quite up to the level of a custom tune. When we would have the older E-Forces show up to the shop, typically they would put down about 375 to 385 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. That's on a bone stock car. If the car had a little bit of exhaust work, things like that, you'd see that creep up to about 400, maybe 405. At 405, basically at 400 to 405, you are now encroaching on 6.4 liter horsepower. With one of Alex's tunes, it would bump that up to like 4.25, 435. So that'll give you an idea as far as the difference between the two tunes. Now, that being said, that is a custom tune by a guy that knows a lot about how to tune a Mopar, In fact, he teaches people how to tune Mopars, and very specific to a fuel quality in an area that you live. The E-Force tune is actually really good as a universal tune. You have to think of it kind of like an OE tune. In this case, it's just going to be a little bit on the rich side and very shy on timing. So you're not giving up that much. You're not giving the feel of the car. You're not giving up that much. I mean, I will argue that subjectively, the trans tune, obviously, you want to have that done by a pro. I don't know how much trans tuning is done in that E-Force setup, but I can assure you it's not going to be near what it would be like getting an aftermarket tune. Zephyr checking in. What up, Professor Mason? Got the fist bump. I like saying all is well. All is well. Thank you. Sean saying Mustangs were selling 200,000 to 300,000 a year for many years in the late 80s and early 90s. Numbers that are unheard of today, for sure. He had saying, only Fox experience I have is helping a buddy who used Fox parts for AC Cobra build. Another good reason to love those cars. The body looks to me like the designers lost their French curves and just used straight edges and triangles. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was an edgy, it was that time of decade, it was being developed in the mid-70s. For release in 78, I believe. And yeah, I mean, it was just a different look for a different time. It just seemed to carry for forever. I mean, 78 to 93, that's a long run. Actually, it's kind of a run that the LX platform's looking at now. Rip's asking, wasn't the Lightning one of the fast accelerating vehicles at the time? Yes, it was. Remember seeing a video about that. Yeah, so the Lightning was basically outpacing everybody at that time. And I mean, the thing you got to remember about the Lightning is you put a drag radial on that thing and it would completely transform. I mean, you could just go yip and onto the throttle and it would just make the prettiest, the Eaton, as inefficient as it was, would make the prettiest sounds. And that's the other thing. Theater. Lightning's always had this fun theater about them that you just can't or couldn't get from it. You certainly couldn't get that from anything else from the factory back then. So, yeah, very hard accelerating car, especially for the first, 50 miles an hour. Just good luck catching one. But yeah, they were a lot of fun. Freaked out a lot of people. In fact, that exact car on the thumbnail, my Fox, I raced on the highway a 99. Was it a? This is when that car only had the 5-liter in it. I don't even think, did it even have a cam in it? Anyway, I raced a Lightning on the highway, and the Lightning, no, it did, had the B cam. 1.7s. I think it had the GT40 intake too. And that Lightning was just right here on my door handle, and that was a big deal back then. Ken saying Fox body with Flowmaster is one of the best sounding exhausts of all time. I will agree with that. Himiad saying 392 tuning question. Ever hear of Powerhouse Performance in Central Florida? They are fairly close to me, so might be attractive for a basic tune. Well, there's no such thing as a basic tune. I mean, a car is either tuned right or it's not. Haven't heard of them, but if they've got a decent pedigree in terms of, if they've got several cars that you know of that have done well, by all means, let their work speak for itself. Sean saying my Hellcat makes the time slips. My pulley 6-speed Terminator was more fun on the street. And that's kind of more the point here, and really worth discussing is, again, I always talk about that fun factor and what is and what isn't fun about these new cars. And so it was interesting today. My brother-in-law and I were I was changing oil in the Fox, and he was driving my Hellcat. I never get a chance to ride in that car. I was like, hey, you drive. I never ride in this thing. And anyway, he was driving it. He's a very accomplished driver, very, as a matter of fact, accomplished driver. And so I'm like, yeah, get on, I don't care. I'm thinking to myself, man, this car is big, plush, comfy. I mean, you can ride in the thing, you know, for 2 days and not get tired of it. And it's funny because it's fast and all, but you never feel like it's fast. It never feels like fast, and it's got a 309 gear, tune, the whole bit. Whereas I was driving the Fox body today, and it's like, man, this thing's punchy. You know, it always seems there. The car's just really happy and happy and wants to play. You know, whereas something like this, it just never really wants to play like that. So. Fun on the street is actually a better investment than fast on the track. Even saying, hey, B, quick question. I just bought a new clutch for my MT82 and was wondering if I needed to buy a flywheel or if I could just resurface the stock one. Typically you can resurface the stock one if it's your first clutch, but check it for surface cracks. But again, normally you've got some service life there with your flywheel, but if you see a bunch of burnt marks on it, but primarily surface cracks, definitely not good. You may still want to just get it resurfaced. Always a good idea for that. But, you know, most of the time we would just take we would just burr it, you know, just basically get a wire brush on a pneumatic Dremel, basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, and just, you know, get the funk off of them. That's some old school back in the day shit, though. Probably not recommended by today's standard. Zephyr R&D saying, with a cold air intake and a Hellcat hood, would you happen to know what might be good to keep rain from saturating the air filter in these cars parked in the rain? Yeah, JLT sells a block off that goes right there. It actually, there's 4 bolts that hold that thing onto the hood itself, and it just goes boop, and it pops right up there and keeps it from getting a bunch of water on there. Let's see. Coda's saying, let's talk inner chillers, i.e. killer chiller or forced inductions inner chiller thoughts. Some thoughts. I like Kincaid's kit. I like the original killer chiller for several reasons. One, it's smaller. It works great. The basic kit, don't get all the valves, bells, and whistles or whatever. No, don't get that one. Get the basic kit. It hooks up a lot more easily for the guys that are installing it. It's a more compact design, so it's a lot more friendly to the tech that's installing it, but it works great. The inner chiller, on the other hand, and it'll bring temps down. I mean, in hot weather, it'll bring it down to like 60 odd degrees. So like say 62. The killer, the inner chiller, the bigger one, will get it down to like 55 degrees is one of the lower ones that I've seen. I mean, the lines are all iced up and everything else. But they are bigger, and I don't know that bigger is necessarily better in this particular situation, especially when you look at the cost difference. So between the two, which one would I pick? I like the killer chiller because on the dyno, I haven't seen a huge difference between the two in terms of power. So, you know, do you go with what you know with the Kincaid unit that obviously it works fine, or do you go with the bigger one because bigger is always better? And I don't know. I don't really see a reason for the bigger one. Again, when they start to take up that much real estate, it's, I don't know, a little unnecessary. But getting back to it, so yes, you want your temperatures to be as low as you can possibly get them for your bricks, right? You're trying to get that water temperature as cool as you possibly can. But you've got to understand that that part is only effective with high temperatures. In other words, high ambient temperatures. Dragging that temperature down. If you are not running the car in high ambient temperatures, then the need for the system starts to go away and go away and go away. In other words, you're not going to run the thing down to 20 degrees in 40-degree weather, if hypothetically, if you could, and really gain a big power gain. In fact, the Demon chiller, you find the same thing practically on the red eyes. They don't even run at temperatures, ambient temperatures, over or under 55 or 58 degrees. I think it's 55 degrees. Somebody fact check me on that, but I know it's lower than 55 and the thing won't run. So, so that'll give you an idea. So in other words, if you're able to get a less expensive kit that fits better, that works great, and I mean works, just ask Racer X. I mean, when we were putting that one on his car, it's like night and day in terms of high temperature consistency, and it'll pick up some power along the way too. So when you look at it from that point of view, and the thing gets down to 61, there is no difference between 61 and 58, right? But there's also no difference between 61 or 65 and 52 in terms of coolant, you know, the intercooler temperature and actual power output. So I don't know. Hopefully I didn't confuse that. Cody's asking, why does Toyota have to make unlocking their PCM an expensive thing? Even Mopar locks theirs, but it's not even as expensive as unlocking Toyotas. I think they've got a different protocol with theirs. I don't know what they're up to with that, but I think the other side to that might just be that, you know, how many people are even messing with Toyotas? You know, you got to make it worth their while, right? Mr. Blacktop saying, I craved a fuck body when I was in college in the mid-90s, but you had to be very careful when buying the used ones. People beat the hell out of them, then remove the mods. That's absolutely right. Happy Healthy's checking in saying, I drive a Honda Fit and it would beat your car in every field. Yeah, you drag that thing out in the middle of a field and it would. I don't know though. This thing does pretty well off-road. Shawnee's saying, good night, B. Good night, everybody. Fun Fox Talk. Can't wait to see your 89 in the garage. Catch the rest of this tomorrow. Adios. Adios, brother. Have a good one. Coda 376 saying, thanks, B. You got it, brother. Hopefully that answered your question. I know it was kind of a protracted answer. The reason why I say all of that is, look, man, when I was with Pikes, I got to see the installs of these things firsthand, and I got to see which ones... I got the results of all these things as well, and I never really saw anything that led me to believe that the Aussie stuff was just so far and away better. But with that said, if I was running something, if I was running something that, I don't know, man, I'm trying to think of a reason why I would run them, and I can't. So, like in a towing application, or maybe in a like in a Silver State Classic type of a thing, like you're doing long distance, high load, high RPM stuff. But even then, you're going to run out of capacity. So I can't say that I'm in love with it. But again, the Kincaid stuff worked so well that everything else became a bit meh. It was just superfluous to have more when everything you needed was working great right there. So even saying, I really hate being a Coyote guy in regards to the MT82 and the lockout BS. Yeah, that can get a little bit annoying. MT82 transmission ratios, though, are pretty nice. He's asking, why does a lockout even occur with that thing? I don't know, man. I have no idea. I hate to say it, but I quit really messing with Mustang manual transmission stuff with the MT82. Too many issues, too many potential problems. Snap and shift forks, which is like, what? But there's that to think about. I mean, the car needs to have an adjustable shifter in it from the factory. But yeah, just stuff like that was, I'd hear about that and was really frustrating. I never did understand the lockout deal though. Obviously, it's something to do with synchros, and I just don't know. My thought is it has something to do with synchros, but they shouldn't. But again, the MT82 is funny because the gear ratios are perfect in it. In fact, they're the best transmission ratios I could possibly think of. But I don't think that the internals are all that great with it in terms of the synchros, and they're not able to deal with the higher RPM, would be my guess. T saying, you bring your Fox Body to the channel? Yes, the Fox Body will be the latest addition to the channel. So we'll have Little Miss Revlon, aka the Mistress. You'll have Sierra, which is the 72 GMC, which we're waiting on parts to show up for, as always. And then the black car, which is my first Fox, and that one, she'll be making her debut. I'll start filming some stuff on that car probably on Tuesday. And there you'll see me, I'll be pulling the radiator out, and I may go ahead and just, if I can figure out a way to do it, to film me cutting and welding basically the seat mount on the driver's side. It's broken, it's torn out of the floor of the car, or at least the mount that it's on, that mount's mounted to the floor of the car. And of course it's spot welded, it's got 1,000 spot welds on a complete train wreck. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna try to cut out a piece, measure everything up, weld it in place, and then basically try to do a repair that way. If that doesn't hold over time, then I'll just replace that center section. I may just go ahead and buy that center section and wrap it up in plastic and have it waiting if that fix that I put together doesn't fix it. I think it will though. Let's see, Madera's asking, is a super or a turbocharged setup a good idea as a power adder to eliminate lag on higher boost turbos? Oh, we're talking about a compound setup, a supercharger / turbocharged setup. So here's the funny thing. I only have one vehicle that I've ever been even minorly involved in that was a combination, a compound setup, and that was turbo. It's a GT500 turbos blowing into the supercharger. The problem, and it made good power. I think the car made on a Dyno jet, I think it made 700 horsepower to the rear wheels, but it was dialed up to 11, man. That car had lots of boost. I think it was, I forget how much boost it was making, 16 or 18 pounds of boost. Anyway, no, it's more than that. It's like 8, maybe it was 21. Anyway, the problem with that setup is, yeah, it spooled up fairly quickly, but you would expect that with the Root supercharger, or I should say positive displacement supercharger. But here's the problem. You've got turbos on it now, and turbos are an exhaust restriction. And this is what people understand about how turbochargers work. And this is why, for me, exhaust is like you need it for scavenging. But when people talk about back pressure is amazing because it works for you in a turbocharger up to a certain point. Well, Root superchargers don't like that. They need everything downstream to be wide open, because if not, then you're going to have a restriction, which makes you make more boost. But this is a time when more boost is a bad thing. It's more boost because there is a restriction in the system. The turbos don't like having to force feed a belt-driven intake manifold. They want to be able to use the intake manifold unrestricted to feed directly into the ports. The supercharger being there basically creates a problem because there's no runner length in terms of tuning. You're relying on the blower making boost initially and then just basically turning the thing into a pressure vessel. There's no tuning involved with it. So the turbos plus the supercharger, you can make more power, but it's far less efficient, not to mention you're taking air that has been heated, regardless of if it's been intercooled, and introducing it into the supercharger that makes the most heat. Anyway, you have very high discharge temperatures with that thing, which also kills power. So again, and it makes more boost. Well, in this case, again, more boost is not a good thing. You've got two reasons why the thing's making more boost than it should, which means you've got two inefficiencies built into the system. Now, where does that work well? Works fantastic on steady state machines. Generators, water pumps are, that's where that type of system works with diesels. You would maybe find that in a two-stroke diesel where they're using the positive displacement supercharger, in this case, as an air charger to feed the engine, and then they're boosting on top of that to create boost. That works in that area where you have a steady state where the thing just sits there and makes 17 pounds of boost, but it does it for a month. That's where that system works. But on something where you need to vary the load, doesn't do as well. In fact, on that car, I want to say they put a different, they pulled the blower off, put a different manifold on it, ran just the turbos, and it went from making like low 7s to mid 8s in terms of horsepower to the rear wheels. So, but in terms of drivability, yeah, I mean, it removed some of the lag, but believe me when I tell you, it wasn't optimized by any stretch to do anything. Let's see. Cody said I had the idea of tuning my Corolla when I was working on my Durango because I want to see how far I could push it before I turbo it, and I was thinking about getting a tune for it. Go for it, man. Might be onto something. I mean, playing with that stuff is how you learn. Is ever saying, I'm days late to the party. Did you buy a Fox body? No. That is my original Fox body from way, 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 way back in the day when I had lots of long flowing, beautiful hair. But that's the car that I actually learned how to basically do everything that I know how to do now on. All of that knowledge came from that car that you see in that picture. So, and it's been through a lot of lives over its life, and I'm going to be kind of bringing it back to life. Like I say, the car's got a ton of sentimental value, and it deserves to be, brought back to its old glory, so to speak. So, yep, we got a lot to do, but it'll be fun, and hopefully you guys can, join me on the journey. It should be fun along the way. You saying it sucks that the engine is so badass and yet the transmission is literally the worst of the 3 pony cars. Yeah, he's talking about that MT82. Kevin saying, hey, what do you say about driving a slow car being fast or a slow car fast is true because my 96 Z28, fun car by the way, has an LT1 stock with not even 10,000 miles on it, and I love turning it at 30 miles an hour. The thing is dramatic. They're just a lot of fun, man. You've got to, hang on a second. Dead. Oh, what's the body count tonight on Skeeter? Is that 5? The thing is that when you learn to drive something that's fun, and then you own something that's fast, like ridiculously fast. The way that things are ridiculously fast today, when you learn how to have fun, and when you have the confidence to play with the car, that's when they're fun. And I think that's really kind of the overall value here, is that cars today don't really invite you to have fun with them. And this goes back to the whole, Hellcat, everything. You get a Hellcat and you get a Hellcat and all that, whatever with that. Because they never really invite you to have fun. Everything happens at such an elevated rate in terms of speed. Whereas Mustangs and F-bodies and the pickup trucks and all of that, you can just do and go out and do dumb stuff and have a bunch of dumb fun at speeds that are not going to, in effect, take your life for the most part. You can go out and have a good time and enjoy it and enjoy the car and giggle all the way home. Whereas stuff like the Hellcats, and even the Coyote and the 392, and the LT1 cars. They are fat. The NA cars are get you to jail in like 3 seconds fast. So, I don't know, but yeah, just that when you can have fun with something, you're motivated to play with it. When you play with it, that's when you learn. That's when you learn how to drive the thing. It's when you learn how to drift the thing. It's when you learn basic driving dynamics. You want to start going to SCCA events. You want to do a couple of closed course events with it. You want to take the thing out and just play and practice with it. That's how you get good at anything. I had the benefit of living in an area where I could just go out and do dumb stuff whenever I wanted to, and so that's what I did. And yeah, all of us were doing that back then. I mean, I'm nobody special, trust me. We were all going out and doing, how far can you carry a drift on a roundabout? I mean, stuff like that. Anyway, the modern stuff, it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't lend itself to having fun like that anymore. Until you say nice, I like it. Rip saying, I always thought a compound set would be less efficient than just having a turbo or a supercharger by itself. Yep, that is very true. Very true, and that's why you just don't see them out there too much. Not on a 4-stroke engine. Zephyr R&D saying, let's see, flared with 295 squared independent rear suspension and all the Maximum Motorsports suspension and chassis goodies. No, we're not going to make an American Iron Series SCCA car out of it. No, it's going to stay looking pretty much the way that it is now. Maybe a couple of things will change here and there, but for the most part, and she's going to stay, 351 Windsor based, and not going to get crazy with it. But I am going to build it to have fun with the car, and that was always where that car did its best work. Now, that being said, the car does have a little bit of a street racing history. In fact, it's got a lot of a street racing history. In fact, there was okay, so this is actually pretty funny. That car was, at one point, it had an identical twin. My car with a 302 and a Powerdyne supercharger, F-cam and 1.7s and GT40 intake. It had weld wheels, bigs and littles, 10 holes, front and back. This is when it had drum brakes on the back of the car. A buddy of mine, I'll call him an associate of mine, he had a black GT also, and it looked identical to mine, except it was 347 Edelbrock RPM intake, custom grind cam on a 200 shot. And yeah, if you picked the wrong one of us to run, it was bad. And so yeah, there's a couple of times where we would take mine out, my car would lose, throw more money on it, get mad, say he skipped a shift or whatever, missed a shift rather, and then I think show up freaking mid to low 9-second car in a wreck shop. So anyway, I digress. Ethan saying, so will the Challenger and Charger be in production next year? Yes, they will. I read somewhere that they are planning on cutting them out for something new by 2021. Not going to happen, brother. 2021 but 2023 may be the year. Rift is saying, one of my dreams is to still buy a Fox body and put a crate Coyote motor in it with a Whipple. You can make a lot of power with that setup. Well, yeah, that's an 8-second combination if you do it right. The Coyote swapped Fox Mustangs, it's not uncommon for those to be like deep into the 10s on a stock tuned stock Coyote motor. Rip saying, going back to just having fun, get whatever car you have. I have had a Ford Probe that was very fun to drive along with a Mazda 3. I had a Probe GT that I loved. Freaking loved mine. That's basically a Mazda 3. I love that car. Madeira saying, is the compound system part of the reason why the Lancia Delta was so unreliable outside of being Italian? No, that's just Italian stuff doing what Italian stuff does. But I didn't, I'm not familiar with Lancia Deltas. So, but if it's a compound system, not talking about compound turbos, that's a completely different thing. But if you're talking about a compound, two different types of forced induction application, that would lend itself to not being the greatest in terms of durability. Again, just for the heat that's generated, definitely not a good thing. Hey, Nick, thank you very much, man. I appreciate the contribution, brother. Didn't have a question to go along with it, but appreciate the contribution to the cause. Some Ferrari guy saying, I used to be about straight line speed in my LS3 C6, but with my Track Pack GT M6, I'm much more about road course. A lot of folks will move from drag racing to closed circuit racing. But what a lot of guys do, and this is something that actually happened to me at one point, I got completely out of drag racing for a while in favor of SCCA type stuff. I had done the street racing thing, the drag racing thing at the track was fun, but I had a buddy of mine that was, and my dad and still is into closed circuit racing and autocross. In fact, I remember very vividly being very, very, very young, and they had a watching autocross with him. So, but yeah, it was funny because I got into autocross and I was hooked. I mean, it was just so much fun. And I mean, I would take anything on that autocross track. I took the Lightning was, won't go down the list here, but the Lightning, if you were to ask me what my favorite was probably one of my favorite because, I mean, it was put the thing in second. When you put those Ford transmissions in second, they start off in second. They never come out of second gear. So you put it in second and it would just be, drift the thing through any of the longer corners. And then when you just came close to getting around that apex, just roll into the throttle kind of quick to pitch the truck a little bit, just to set it up for the straightaway. That would start the tires smoking, and then just watt the thing as soon as you could go straight. I'd put on a show in that truck. It was so much fun, man. But again, those are the memories that I remember. I mean, in fact, I've got a picture. I'll have to find it somewhere from, I think it was 03. That's how far back I go with this kind of stuff. But back in 03, it's got a buddy of mine's Mustang in the background and me going around a corner in the Lightning, in the black Lightning. And I think there's like that much contact patch on one of the tires. It's pretty funny. Let's see. Nick's saying, hey man, 6-1 Emmy here. Hey, cool. I want to go forced induction. What would you recommend to go that route? Well, it all depends on what your plans are for the car. It depends on what you want to do with that vehicle. You guys know that I'm a big fan of the E-Force kit. Whipple also makes a good kit for those cars. Those are the kits that I would probably go with. Now, yes, the Pro Charger option is out there. The Pro Charger option is a good option. But you got to remember that the only downside to the Pro Charger is that you're not going to be able to run enough boost to really feel it. And what I mean by that is that you need to be running somewhere around a minimum of 8, somewhere around 10 to 12 pounds of boost to really get something out of that supercharging. And you're just not going to get there. I mean, the fun really starts at about 8 pounds, right? Well, a lot of these kits are like 5 to 6 pound kits, and it's just, at that low of a boost level, it's practically not even worth it. But the problem with that, let's say you are working with like a 7 pound kit or an 8 pound kit, because the centrifugal kind of just feeds power in, you never really feel it. I mean, you can see it on a time slip, and you can see it if you race somebody and they start to peel back from you. But from an everyday driving standpoint, you never feel it. Now, on the other hand, if you use something like the E-Force kit or a Whipple, or just, pick something, Kenny Bell, that power hit is pretty much all the time. And you can play with that kind of power in a way that Well, I mean, obviously you have to be at wide open throttle to get anything out of that centrifugal unit. These blowers, I mean, even at partial throttle, you're still making boost and the car will still feel punchy. Basically, positive displacement setups pretty much just make the car feel like it's got a much larger engine than it really does. And it makes the thing a bit more fun to drive. So anyway, that's the route that I would go. Plus, it's a cleaner install. Let's see. Rich is saying Pro Charger would be the way to go for longevity, but a twin screw would always be more fun. Exactly. Zephyr RD saying, if you haven't seen it, you might want to check out the Smoking Tire Notchback. That would be my cup. Oh, so I've seen that one. What the hell is his name? I know which one you're talking about. Good setup on that car. Again, a perfect example of, you don't, I think his car is a 306, might make 270 to 300 to the rear wheel, something like that. But for canyon carving, it's a great car. So yeah, you can certainly go that route, no doubt about it. See, Cody's saying, I don't know if this is true or not because I haven't been able to tear down my block, but I read that my Corolla engine has oil squirters on the block, and I want to know what the point of that is in an eco car. Well, a couple of things. I mean, you're just trying to keep the, there's two reasons actually. You're keeping the piston cooler, which helps a little bit in terms of staving off hot sparks and detonation, but it also helps in general lubrication. Some for our guys saying, I'm about 45 minutes away from Watkins Glen in New York. Oh yeah, love going to that track. I'm jealous. My home track when I lived in Northern California was Thunder Hill. Saying, too bad tires and brakes are so expensive. No kidding. That's the one thing that you'll learn real quick if you get into closed circuit racing. I did it briefly with the Vipers, and I can tell you that I was going through a set of tires about every 2 months. Brakes were about, I was swapping out pads about every 4 to 5 months. Zephyr saying that Lancia was a Group B rally car. They use a super fast spooling roots blower to reduce lag for the big hair dryer. I can maybe see that working. But again, it's a lot of heat, man. The only way that could work realistically is if you had a bypass where you were running the turbo. And okay, so getting into that compound system, what I was describing was what you would think of, like the turbo feeds into the supercharger, which feeds into the engine. There are other systems out there, and they used a bypass. And what it was is you would have a supercharger that underneath it, you would see the feed for the turbochargers. The supercharger, there was a one-way deal for the turbos. The turbos didn't feed until a certain PSI. These cars were basically direct injection. Some of them didn't even have throttle bodies, kind of like the way that the BMWs work, where they adjust fueling based on only fuel. A bunch of real trick stuff, but nothing like what you would see on the street. And unfortunately, those systems were simply not reliable enough to work properly on the street long term. Ethan's saying, let's see. Oh no, Rick is saying, since I already have a one-piece drive shaft diff brace, 180 T-stat, and unlike PCM, what about do you think it would cost to get a 285 up or 10% lower with a tune? So you basically already have all the stuff that you need. So again, $1,300 for the fuel system, plus probably 6 hours to install it. So figure that's $2,000, right? You've got the tune itself, probably with a trans tune, which is, let's say, $1,000 for that, or $1,200 for that. That's going to be $3,200. The pulleys themselves, about $1,000, so you're at 41 plus install. You're looking at 6, 7, 8, 9. What am I at? 41 puts you at 5. So I'd say somewhere around $5,000 realistically. You can still run the same plugs that you're running. What am I forgetting? Can't think of anything off the top of my head. That should pretty much round you out. So, you know, 5, maybe 6 grand at the most, but certainly nowhere around 11. You know, if I'm forgetting something in terms of labor, which I don't think I am, 6 for the lower, pinning the crank also. That's going to be part of the deal, but 6 hours should cover that. Plus, like I said, I'm being generous and giving 3 for the upper. That's 6, 9, I think 6 for the fuel system because it's just pumps. That's 15, roughly 15 hours in labor plus the parts. Seems about right to me. So yeah, figure 16 at the most 18 hours in labor since you already have most of that stuff done. And your parts. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 22, 23, odd $100 in parts. Even saying, sad to see that the Camaro is taking a dirt nap in 23. Saying, whatever, man. The other guys that I ever see show up to race consistently are the Coyote and 392 guys. I hardly ever see the LT1 or LS3 Camaros, which is a travesty because when they do, typically those guys are really cool. In fact, there's one guy, I like him a lot. Cannot think of the guy's name. He's got a white Camaro. I think he's got a Instagram too. Anyway, white Camaro, full house car, full effort car, heads, cam, intake, gear, a little bit of everything. On the spray, it's a 10.0 car. It's fast as shit. And granted, it's kind of a race car at that point. I mean, you can drive it to and from the track, which makes it a street car. But again, you know, full effort setup, going that quick. But it's the only one that I see, and I hate that. I mean, but you know what? Fair enough. Tons of ZL1s though. I see. Granted, now I think they all kind of know each other, but there's, I think, kind of a round robin of 7, maybe 8 ZL1s that show up fairly regularly at our local track here. So, I mean, not too shabby, right? But yeah, very few of the NA cars. But, you know, I'm kind of shocked as far as how few of some of the cars that are out there that you don't see. I mean, how few of the, like, GT500s, never have once seen a GT500 in drag strip. Starting to wonder if they even exist. I've seen more C8 Corvettes at the drag strip than GT500s. Mm-hmm. How does that even work? I mean, how does that even play out in the real world? But that's the world we're living in, so that's what we got to roll with. I was ever saying, not sure the stock Nag 1 would like a Roots blower on the 6.1. Actually, they don't have a big problem with them. You got to remember that the Nag 1 was behind some pretty nasty cars back in the day. Those cars were E55 Mercedes. So, yeah, I think it would be okay. You know, I wouldn't throw the kitchen sink at it, but I think it'd be all right. Let's see. Rick is saying his 09 SRT8 6-speed with a Pro Charger on 9 pounds put down 530 to the wheels, but I really could not feel the difference until I went to about 14. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, guys. I mean, look, these cars are heavy. Yeah, it's great to have power on the back half of the dyno chart, but again, you're just not gonna feel it. It's not gonna get you. You know, it's just not. So, my O2 on that one. Let's see. Oh, some frog guy said the reason why I see the SS going away is a new one with some option is 45 grand. At that point, just buy a vet. Well, the problem is that there are used vets out there, and they're not crappy cars. They do everything really, really well. You know, that's where the Camaro's biggest rival isn't the Mustang, it's the Corvette. And it's a bummer because, yeah, the Camaro starts to look like around 40 to 45 grand. The Vet, talking about the C7 back then, was like an extra 7 or 10 grand more. And it's a Corvette, you know, so say what you will about whatever contrived BS stigma rides along with a Corvette. Love Vets, by the way. But they do everything better than a Camaro. They've got better ergonomics. They accelerate better. They handle better. They are better than the Camaro. And this is, again, why it bums, the Camaro bums me out. It's like that, you know, the old story about the lovable loser. The Camaro's not a lovable loser. It tried, but it's like it made every decision that it could to sabotage itself. Like, I'll give you a perfect example of this. One of the reasons why I don't see too many SSs at the drag strip anymore is because of the scat packs. I remember this vividly. There was and I don't like picking on anybody in particular. I don't like calling out individuals on stuff like this. But there was a night, there was two guys that had Camaros. Both of them fairly new. This is back in like 17-ish. And I had Shalandra. She was on drag radials. These guys were on drag radials. And I raced both of them throughout the course of the night. And I beat both of them. One of them was on a hole shot. The other one I drove around on the launch, and the guy never could reel me in on the big end. And I remember thinking at the time, because it was kind of a big deal to be racing a Camaro with a 392 car, much less an SRT, with the only thing really done to it was had the tune on it at the time, but that was it. It was full weight. And I would weigh it every time. It was 4,495 or 4,500 pounds, depending on how much fuel I had in the car, around that half tank range. But anyway, what are we talking about 5 pounds for? The thing is that I shouldn't have won either one of those races, especially the one where I went around the guy on the launch. Both of us were on drag radials, and I know the guy didn't spin. That should never have happened at all with the Camaro, and it's one of these things where the guy would almost be justified. The guy would have been justified in just taking the car right back to the dealership at that point, because lighter weight, 8-speed or 10-speed automatic, supposed to be better in every way, but it loses to an SRT, the most bloated version of the Challenger Scat Pack group is the SRT. And in a way, I didn't feel bad for the guy, but I kind of felt bad for the guy. It wasn't like, there was no emotional thing to it. But I was just thinking, damn, how bummed out do you have to be? Then I'll fast forward a little bit. This is last year. Buddy of mine, Chris, with the orange, the Go Mango Hellcat. It's got my tune on it. Car runs great. Mid 10-second car all day. We were at the track one night, and there was the group of guys that we now know is just the group of guys with the ZL1s. We're all there. And our cars at that point in time were both stock gear. My car did not have a tune on it, but was running the drag pack, and he was running his setup, kind of a street setup, but ET Street R's. Bravado setup, actually. I was running 1070s. I think he was running 1090s. And the ZL1s were all running 1120s. And it wasn't like it was hot outside. I mean, it was warm, but it wasn't super warm. It was a normal night. And I remember us talking about it. We're going, what, 20s? Like, you don't, that car should be a 10-second car, but yet here it is running 1120s. And so I started, we're just talking about, you know, the deal with the Camaro and all of that. On the NA side, it was kind of the same idea, except in this case, there was no gunning down the Hellcat for any of those cars. And I always felt like, damn it, that it could have just been better. Bigger blower, more efficient, not as hot of a discharge temp, and that changes the complexion of that car like that. I mean, just like that. Throw the big Maggie on that thing, it completely changes that car. But even then, it brings it into the realm of the Hellcat. It doesn't blow right past it. I mean, it's not like it just runs off and hides from the thing. Now, granted, there's a lot of fast ZL1s, real fast for that matter. Tons of fast Cadillacs out there, like obnoxiously fast Cadillacs. But you always forget about the Caddy, and quite honestly, everybody steps right over the Camaro to get to the Mustang because they take to boost so well. And I mean, they're just a credit card away from being a freaking 9-second car. Like, you give the car to the shop on Monday and you get it back on Friday ready to go racing, and it's a 9-second car. So, you know, it's tough to get there with a Camaro. It's real tough to get there with the Mopars, but the Mopars on the street were just always so much more fun to drive. Take the ergos out of it, they were just a lot more fun to drive. Let's see. Matt Farah, that's it. Some Ferrari guy. That's the with his Fox body. Nice car. Waylon's coming in saying hi. Hello, Waylon. Madara's saying, so would you say the anti-lag is the better option for a higher turbo boost build with longevity? Yeah, depending on how you get to anti-lag. I mean, I'd say just freaking hit it with a 75 shot and call it good. But yeah, you can hit it with the anti-lag, or and it also depends on, you know, where you're coming into anti-lag, because anti-lag, when you take your foot off the throttle, if it's still throwing fuel at it, that's also an anti-lag to keep the blower or keep the turbo spinning. So that when you roll back into the throttle, there's different types of anti-lag out there. This is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, anti-lag's just fine. Works great. Queen's saying, have you driven the Accord Coupe V6s? No, I haven't. He says, almost considering that as a backup plan to the 5-liter, just in case. I do like how spacious it looks in the sunroof. Actually, I like a lot of those. For me, I mean, anything that's got 4 doors and a hatchback is what I would jump on, mainly because I'm kind of a nerd for the so-called hot hatch segment. Freaking love those cars, man. God, they are stupid fun, and you put them in the right environment and they are like more fun than they really should be. Coda's saying, sorry to bombard you with Durango and Corolla questions. Just trying to get as much information as I can since I'm just getting into street and drag racing and being a young mechanic. Yeah, no problem, man. That's how you learn. Let's see. Wallet's asking, hi, can I ask you, what do you think about the 309 diff? Is it worth it? Yes, but only do it if you plan on buying either a pedal commander or having the car tuned. The 309 diff in a Hellcat it's funny because it almost feels softer unless you change the driver command torque. Mainly because there's just nothing for the torque to push against. There's no resistance. So it can feel like it's a little bit too soft. But once you throw a little driver command torque, completely different car. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that they should have come from the factory that way. Let's see. Zephyr's asking, back to basics, do I need to tune to use a 180 T-stat on the 6.1? No, you don't need to. It'll run and drive perfectly fine. However, to optimize your experience with your 180 thermostat, I would highly recommend getting a tune because that way you can tune the fans. Good thing is you don't have to get your computer unlocked, so that's a good thing. And really, you're just left with buying credits if you're on the HP Tuner software. So you'll get better performance out of the car, obviously with the tune, but really being able to adjust the fans will help it run cooler in stop and go traffic or in the staging lanes, things like that. It's just the way to square or complete the circle, so to speak, with that part. Let's see. Lee Hancock saying, I've had 3 Fox bodies back in the day, man, I couldn't go back. Saying you couldn't go back to the Fox bodies, or what? I mean, let's see. Riff saying, okay, so nowhere around 11 grand then. No, not for, considering you already have so much done to the car, no, not at all. He said, I either need to talk to them or go somewhere else. Look, if you're looking to throw money at it, just give Pikes a call, tell them you talked to me. They'll take care of you. I know it's a pain in the ass to ship the car, but that might be an option for you. Just saying. Because I'd hate to see you spend that kind of money and get fleeced on the deal. Oh, some guy saying a white Camaro guy is George Loves Speed. That's right. Love that dude, man. That guy in person is super cool. I haven't had a chance to see his YouTube, but yeah, George Loves Speed. Check him out. I don't typically endorse anybody's channel, but in this case, I absolutely will. Check out George Loves Speed. Get on there on his next video. Tell him you heard it from me. If you haven't heard about him before, say you heard his name on the B. Mason show. Awesome guy, awesome car, super cool guy, and I've been able to, ever since he started going to the drag strip, I've kind of tried to keep up with him from NA, then he started throwing nitrous at it and everything else, and it's been kind of cool to see the evolution of that car. Super cool guy, though. So thanks, Frog, I appreciate that. Rift is saying, Ed Zephyr, I've had a 180 thermostat on my ProCharge 6.1 for a long time with no problem, and have not tuned for it. Yeah, you don't have to. And Riff saying, I'm sure it's better to have it tuned for, but it'll still work. Yes, it is. Extra saying, do you think 93 octane tune will mess up the longevity of your engine even if you're always running 93 octane? No. No, as a matter of fact, 93 octane tune it's just fine. I mean, it's no different, provided that it's done by somebody who knows how to tune your platform. You'll be fine. It's running an 87 octane in your 93 octane tune that can be detrimental. So, if the tune is done right, again, if it's done by somebody with proper knowledge on board, you'll have a good experience with it. Let's see. Trudy's saying, would be great to see some cheaper options in the future, especially since the big three didn't get their act together until we bailed them out. A well-equipped Scatty is not cheap, let alone a Hellcat. Real talk. And that's, again, I mean, you haven't seen some of my other videos about me just lamenting the fact that we don't have a low-priced hot rod to really look at. I mean, yeah, you've got the Camaro, the LT1, I think is what they're calling it, or the LT or whatever they're calling the base model hot rod Camaro. There's that. But yeah, Scat Packs, Mustangs, the whole lot, they're all relatively expensive. So, we'll see where they end up here in the next couple of years. Trudy saying, how come you ended up leaving Pikes? I ended up leaving mainly because I was offered a position in the field that I came from. So, that's why I left. It was, you got to remember, working on cars and doing the car thing it's a tough way to make a living, man. I mean, it is a lifestyle that you've got to be able to embrace. I mean, it's a 24-hour-a-day gig, and it can get tough, and it's the grind, really. We were there from, say, 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the morning. That was not uncommon. 10 to 10 would be a short day. Typically be 10 to 11, 10 to midnight. So, but yeah, I had an offer to get back in on the construction side, so I jumped on that, and still am involved with the shop, just not in a direct from a direct line of sight perspective anymore. Let's see. Hector's asking, do you think tuning with a 93 Octane and using a pedal commander will mess with anything? Not at all. They're two completely different things. Pedal commander is just driver command torque, which is a fancy way of saying making your throttle body open and close more or less with how much you move your foot. Let's see. Kevin saying, hey Mason, is it fair to say that the enthusiast car for Dodge is really only the Hellcat and the RT? My point is that the Scat Pack, to me, is a car that you buy knowing there really is, it's complete as it is. I'm going to give that a soft agreement. There is some things that you can do to a 392, but you're right. I mean, it's already fairly well optimized. The RT is out there if you want something NA to throw money at, but again, the money's the same to modify a 5.7 or a 6.4. It's just how much are you going to get? And a lot of guys go, well, the 6.4 doesn't take to mods very well. No, it takes great to mods. Here's the problem though. It's starting out way up here. And people go, well, what about the Camaro, the LT? I mean, you can do this, that, this, you pick up this much power. Yeah, but you're starting out like down here. And they're basically the same size engine, 6.2, 6.4. I mean, yeah, 6.4 is a little bigger, but 6.4 is making 485 horsepower, whereas the 6.2 is making 455. That's a pretty big delta to try to cover. 6.2 has got fantastic heads, arguably a better intake manifold, but the 6.4, again, a little bit higher compression, a little bit bigger camshaft, an intake manifold that's really well designed for the task at hand of moving a lot of weight from A to B really quickly. It does that really well. So, when you look at it from that standpoint, the 6.4 is very well optimized to do what it does. Anything with forced induction, you can always make it make more boost. And the cool thing about it is it's kind of factory equipped with a supercharger. So there's that. But for my money, I would say that, yeah, the Hellcat is really more the enthusiast car. The 5.7 will kind of get you in the door. And the 6.4 is there. Basically, yeah, for the guy that doesn't want to throw the kitchen sink at a car, maybe wants to throw a tune and a little exhaust at it, the 6.4 is the car for you. Let's see. Cody is asking, does 89 octane make a difference on a car that usually takes 87? I've been using 89 octane. It's probably just a placebo effect in both cars, and top end and torque felt like it went up. That depends. On older cars, no, doesn't really make that big of a difference. On newer cars, though, it can, primarily because they use wideband O2s, much faster sampling rates, and quite honestly, they will run and will optimize on 87, 89, 91, or 93. Basically, it depends how the operating system is working. If you've got, let's say that you're commanding, and we're gonna come up with what's the best way to explain it? This imaginary engine. Okay, I'm gonna bring this down to just some basic numbers here. But this imaginary engine has a table, and that table says that it will give it 15 degrees of timing. And this imaginary engine runs on 15 degrees of timing. That is the most timing it will be given. This imaginary engine in its operating system that's commanding 15 degrees of timing has other spark modifiers, which is just a fancy way of saying tables that it's looking at, that will reduce the amount of timing based on what the NOx sensors are reporting. So this is how the Mopar and I think the GM systems also work like this. If the NOx sensors are stock and they're not numbed by a tune, and they start seeing knock, then they just reduce the amount of timing that they're going to throw at the car. And over time, it will have an understood amount of knock that it will perceive, it will anticipate, and it will reduce that number from 15. Remember, in our imaginary engine, we're always commanding 15 degrees of timing based on, say, 93 octane and above fuel. Now it knows that, and it adapts to the fact that you're running a fuel that it has to remove 2 degrees of timing for to get within a certain knock threshold. That's when you're running your, say, 87 octane or your 89 octane. Modern cars can do that. And so in this case, yeah, 89 octane, like my work truck, for example, I run it on 89 octane. It gets the best fuel economy with 89 octane, and it performs its best at 89 octane. This is one of those situations where 89 octane, let's say that engine gives 15 degrees of timing at 89 octane. Well, then going with 93 octane isn't going to do you any good, because you're already able to work within your knock threshold at this theoretical, this imaginary 15 degrees of timing. The difficult thing about explaining that, though, is if you've ever data logged one of these Mopars just driving down the street, they will go into knock retard for literally no reason under the sun. The trucks are notorious for this. I was data logging my older work truck. Again, it's another Hemi truck, and just cruising down the road, and 3 degrees of short-term knock retard, and then it throws everything back into it. It's just funny. Dodges are weird about that. The truck didn't run any different. It didn't act any different. And that'll tell you just how important timing is, by the way, especially at these low timing values. But anyway, I hope that answers the question. Yes, it will help in some cases. And a lot of these modern cars, compression ratios are high. And if you have a high compression ratio, you're going to need more octane, and you can pull timing back. You can retard the timing and make it work with lower grade fuel. It's just not going to make that kind of power, and it will learn that, and it knows what to draw it back to based on the knock sensors. Now you start messing with the knock sensor sensitivity, and this is where things get really weird, because now you're starting to get into like some flex fuel tuning that I don't even want to start to talk about. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question. Hector's saying he's referring to the Diablo Sport tuner. Oh, it doesn't matter what you're using, brother. You can be tuning it with anything. It's not going to hurt anything. Quee's saying, sounds good. At first, I was going to go with the 5.7 Challenger, but the value you get for the S197 5-liter is hard to pass up. I've been talking myself into it. That is true. You get a lot of value, a lot of bang for the buck. Hey, White Knuckle, thank you very much. Saying a little contribution to the cause. B, I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. Some mosquito repellent with that. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that, man. Let's see. White Knuckles checking in. Got the 2 fist bumps. I like it. Saying, what's up, brother Bryce? See, the mosquitoes are being friendly tonight. Yeah, a little too friendly. Saying, what gear is usually used to dyno the HP70, 4th or 5th? 4th. I think you said 5th was 1-to-1, correct? No, 6th is actually 1-to-1. For the HP70, you're going to be in 4th, and for the HP90, which is just making more power, you can use 5th gear. If you don't, the problem is that the pull just takes forever if you don't run them in 4th. So, yeah, 4th gear for anything with an HP70, 5th gear for any of the supercharged stuff with the 90. Which would be Hellcat variants of all varieties. HE37 said, there isn't enough reason to make you want a Camaro. It handles well, but it isn't a Corvette. It has a back seat, but it's totally useless. Yeah, it is. Windows are like slits. Can't see out the back window. Yep. They can't all be like the 3rd gen of my wife's My wife's cars are right to drive. HU37 saying the best thing about a Camaro is that its values sink like a stone. You can get a used one cheap. Very true. Cody's saying it pretty much did. Been using an 89 Octane on my Corolla, which is a 2011 Corolla, and I pay attention to miles per gallon. And it went from 25, 26 to 29 to 30, and top end definitely felt like it went up. Yep, see, there you go. Keep her on 89, you'll be happy. Dialysis Forever saying, back in 1990, I remember standing on a Ford lot staring at a canary yellow Mustang GT convertible with a white top. I thought it was such a beautiful car. Those were good looking cars back then. I remember seeing red with a white top too. That looked good. White Knuckles RT's got the thumbs up. Oh, Cody's just letting us know he had some good experiences there since he switched back to a drop-in filter. Let's see. Crazy saying, is it still worth getting a 392, whether it's a Charger or a Challenger, when you have both the Mustang and Camaro beating it? Beating it is kind of a untrue statement, because in stock form, 392s are extremely difficult to mess with on a drag strip. Now, on the street, traction's an issue. From a roll, I'll agree with you. They're kind of sucking hind tick. But at the drag strip, they're not losing to that many. In fact, Shalandra, tire for tire, I think only lost to one stock or stock-ish Mustang GT. Never lost to a stock Camaro. And that's an SRT. So it just depends on the venue. Now, is it worth it? Depends on what your definition of worth is. In other words, do you like real torquey, real snappy cars? If you do, the Mopar is the car for you. If you like high winding, you're not so interested in the G-force as you are just in the total number that the car produces, then the Mustang's for you. The Camaro, it kind of falls into no man's land, unfortunately. And let me define that, by the way. This is something I try to talk about, but and again, it's just my own personal opinion. It's just how I see the car kind of playing out. The Camaro doesn't do anything better than the Mopar. The Mopar already does well. For example, acceleration. It doesn't really do that better than a Scat Pack car. In fact, again, as stated, my personal experience, I never lost to one of those cars. Not tire for tire, not mod for mod, stock or otherwise. In terms of handling is subjective, because handling can mean anything. Handling, you drive your car, you're experiencing handling of some kind. Are you talking about a closed circuit? Are you talking about autocross? Are you talking about just driving around? All of these pseudo-important metrics, I should say pseudo-metrics, for lack of a better way of putting it, start to come into play here. And it's only what you put value on with what actually makes the thing worthwhile, right? So what does it do better than the Mustang? Does it handle better than the Mustang? No, not really. I mean, not really. Does it handle better than the Scat Pack? Yeah, I guess. But I mean, I've hit on-ramps and off-ramps, long sweepers, things like that, really hard with this little guy right here running those tires right there. Stuck to the road, A-okay. Granted, I might have a little bit more experience than the next guy, but car still stuck to the road. I don't do anything super dumb with that thing, because I know it does have some limitations, like with the weight and all. But I guess what I'm saying is that the 392 car has got a great place. It occupies a fantastic place on the mantle, as does the Mustang. But it just depends on what you're interested in, as far as, is it worth it to get it? Because again, to say that it loses for what I did with the car, it didn't lose. Not like it lost every race, and not like it was just a loser in general. And you mentioned the Camaro in that comparative analysis. The issue with throwing the Camaro into the comparative analysis is that it's the one car that's not going to be around much longer. So I don't know. It just makes for a weird discussion, and I like the ZL1, but that's not really what we're talking about. So, and again, the next GT500 I see at the drag strip will be the first. Anyway, I digress. Drew's saying, how do the C8s do at the drag strip? Have you gotten to drive one yet? I haven't driven one yet, but when Amelia Earhart had her vet at Pikes for the nitrous hits, I was at the drag strip and got to see it go down the track. I'd taken a bunch of videos of it, but I never did post them because it's not my business. It was just there to see and watch the car launch. So no, I haven't driven one of those cars, but they do fairly well. 11, what was it, like 1140s, 1130s, something like that, basically on a tire. On the spray, I think it was like 1080s, 1090s, 1070s, whatever. How do they do? They do fine. The car is an amazing car for what it is. I'm curious as far as where it's going to go from here. And, they're talking about a 5.5 liter dual overhead cam setup for the Z06. A hybrid version, and then this version and that version, and at some point it just gets to, what are you going to do with all of that? Is it any more fun? Anyway, the new Vet does look like a lot of fun. It accelerates like a freaking banshee, by the way. The 0 to, I would say the 0 to 80 in that car is it's one of the nastiest launching cars you'll ever see in stock form. It just, when it goes, and it sounds great, but when that car takes off and launches, it's like very, very few stock cars will do what that car can do, especially on stock tires. Midwest Mopar checking in saying, what is your opinion of the new Camaro? Now that you can get it with the 6.2 6-man for just north of 30 grand. My opinion really hasn't changed to that car. Realistically, it should be about that price because that's kind of where it falls in line in terms of technology and everything else. Not that the Hemi's that far ahead of it. Again, good car, fun, hot rod. I mean, you can do a lot with them. You just have to deal with all of the drawbacks and the inefficiencies of the interior of the car. Aside from that, driveline is great. I don't like the idea of, it needs to be direct and port injected. I don't know if they've made that switch yet, but it has to get that because the direct injected variety of that thing is, just leaving deposits all over the valves. But overall, a decent car. It's just not really my cup of tea. Cody's saying, thanks for answering some questions. He's asking, these questions simply come up from experience. I'm working on them. I got to head out, so I'll see you in the next stream. Thank you much, man. Appreciate you hanging out. Let's see. Cal is saying there's an 11-year-old video with the original concept of the 1320. 426 aluminum block, basically a streetable drag pack. Beautiful car. Why they didn't put it in production, I have no idea. The problem is that they did put it in production, and it was called the drag pack. And it was in line with the 345 supercharged car. And you can still buy one, I think, today, or at least you could. Anyway, they went that route with the car, and they also had a Viper powered one, so what gives, right? But anyway, why they didn't, I'm still, I don't know. Let's see, Kevin saying, hey, I think Dodge, instead of coming out with a new model performance cars, need to create an open parts bin. Man, look, you say it can't be that difficult. Look, here's the thing, man. I have been saying that for a long, long, long time. Look, this car behind me is a parts bin car, and it's gone 1016, 1017, and 1019 in really good air. Runs mid-10s with a drag pack all day. Just 309 gear, red-eye rear seat delete, and a drag pack with a tune that really isn't much of a tune. It's just there to accommodate a transmission tune in terms of, you know, our shift points and stuff like that. A little bit more fuel to it also. There's nothing to it. And a 180 thermostat and the requisite changes for a 180 T-stat. I mean, there's my car, as far as tuned cars go, my car with my tune is less of a tune than you might expect. Some driver command torque to make it act right with a 309 gear, and that's it. What can I tell you? Throwing a lot more fuel at it, mainly to help save the catalytic converters. But there's nothing in it that is not a parts bin part, except for the tensioner pulleys, which are just there because the old tensioner pulleys look like shit. Anyway, I digress. But I hear you, man. There's the problem is that you can't parts bin anything from Dodge, and then they want to have a VIN locked. How do you VIN lock a freaking drive shaft? Anyway, Catalyst 99 saying, I got to thinking, what if Dodge ever came out with a four valve V8 and would perform better than the current Hemi? Yeah, I mean, it depends on how they did it. If they did like a 6-liter 4-valve, you know, a 6.4-liter 4-valve, that would be nuts. But it would have to have VVT on both intake and exhaust. And if they did that, it would be nuts. But good luck packaging it, because a cylinder head would be about this freaking tall. And that engine compartment's already really cramped to begin with. So, and then Alex asks, do you think the Diablo tuners are reliable or worth it for an RT? They're canned tunes, man. I mean, they're not bad. They're not going to cause you any problems. But it's, for the price, it's not bad. So, and I mean, I'm not going to say that they're bad. It just keep your ear open for short, low-speed spark knock and things like that. If you run into it, pull some timing out of it. But I've seen them a little bit aggressive. I also saw some of the older tunes with the Diablo where it wiped out all the torque management completely, and that's not what you want to do with an HP70 or an HP90. Craigsy's asking, what do you think the new redesign of the Challenger will look like? I think it's going to look a lot like this thing, except just with a revised LX platform. I don't think it's going to be too far removed from what you're already used to now. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that it's going to basically be more of the same. I'm pretty sure that they're going to re-up, I would guess. If I was a betting man, I would say that they're going to re-up with the LX platform. Maybe lighten it up a little bit, maybe do a little something with the fenders to kind of, you know, gish it up a little bit. But aside from that, you're not looking at too much. Look, this is the formula that works. And it's been proven. America folks like big America cars, and they don't get no more America than that. Mustang is great and all. It's a world platform at that, but you know, again, the Mopar bookends the car argument so well. It's the perfect yin to the Mustang's yang, and again, another reason why that Camaro is just completely pushed out of the equation. It's just such a good split between the two manufacturers. If they change what they've got now, they're going to lose that buyer. And listen, the last thing that Mopar needs is to get a bunch of these things looking like Mustangs, because you get a bunch of guys like me that go, well, what's the point of one of those when I can get the original one over here that is going to do what Mustangs do best, because it is a Mustang. We've already seen what happens when somebody tries to out-Mustang Mustang. It's called a Camaro, and they go extinct, not once, but now looking like it's going to be twice. It's best to find your own niche. The Camaro is like the AMX of today. You know, capable engine. If anybody wants to mess with it, anybody wants to spend any money on it, you can definitely make it faster than hell, but it's never really going to complement the driving experience the way that one of these, whether it's a 392, even 5.7, or a Hellcat, whatever Hellcat variety you want, or the Mustang, and pick a Mustang. And y'all know that I'm kind of got a secret crush on the Mach 1, so there's that. Let's see. Jabril's asking, a Dyno tune is better than a Diablo tune any day, right? Well, yeah, I mean, a real custom dyno tune is always going to be better than a canned tune. All of these vehicles are a little bit different, and a canned tune is sometimes one of the worst things you can do to your car. I had a really bad canned tune for my truck. That's why I say that. Let's see. Dallas is saying my 2018 Challenger 300 came from the factory with a lower tune suspension, got rid of the 245s, added 275s and 305s. Surprised me how well it does on winding roads. Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh man, my shoulder's wrecked. We'll get to that later. I'm going to wreck it again tomorrow morning. H237 said, I can't understand why people criticize the 392. It's well optimized. Is it worth spending big money modding it? No, the Mopar tax is killer for real on that. And you're into Hellcat money. Great NA car though. Yeah, it is. Kevin saying, what I was getting at before is, for the love of God, Mopar, for somebody needs to create different rear end. Well, yeah, in fact, mathematically, 332, 331, anything would be awesome in that car. And then Crazy Josh asking, do you think they changed the power plants maybe to a twin turbo V6 a little bit more from the 392? There was a lot of talk about that with the Giulia platform, which would be moving the LX platform vehicles over to a Giulia or a Ghibli platform on the FCA side, obviously. And I don't know that would be the way to go. Yeah, it would work out fine in terms of just being a power plant, but bro, this is America. I mean, yeah, V6 turbos are neat when they're in a Grand National or in a Cyclone or a Typhoon or a GTR, but I don't know, you're going to have to really do a lot of soul searching before you throw down cabbage on a V6 turbo muscle car, like big car like this. Guys, we are over 2 hours. I got to check out because I got to wake up super early, but I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me tonight. I will keep y'all in the loop as the Mustang stuff starts to unfold, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we shall go from there. Last question was, Trude, I think, was asking about the Camaro before it got pulled. What do they need to do with it? They need to completely redesign it. They need to take a look at what works with the Challenger and do better than the Challenger. And they need to take a look at what works with the Mustang and do better with than the Mustang at what it does, what they do best. That's the only way you can win this fight. The Camaro is in the worst possible shape because it's got Mustang and Challenger right here. They're looking right at it. They're trying to fight a battle on two fronts. Challenger's not, neither is Mustang. At any rate, guys, thank y'all so very much for hanging out. Y'all stay safe out there, stay healthy, and God bless. Look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. That's a wrap, guys. Adios.